Alright, welcome back to another Tech Tip Tuesday. So today we're going to talk about suspension, and I left the truck sitting down for this first part because I wanted to talk about kind of fender gap and the way that the tire fits in here and how that affects your suspension. I know that a lot of people try to just stuff as big of tires as you can in here, and what ends up happening is as you start turning, your tire will hit here, it'll hit back in here. It's usually in the rear end of the fender well that will go and make it hit. As this tire moves up and goes through its range of motion, that gap, as you can see up here, that tire is skinnier than down here at its widest point. So as you go over rocks and the tire comes up, it actually has more of a chance to hit on the inner fender. So let me get it up in the air and we'll talk about that a little more. Alright, so now the wheel's off here. We have a couple of main components to the suspension, and I'm going to say part of it is in the suspension, but I'm also going to include steering in there. So I'm running the Icon Coilovers. They are a 2-inch lift in the front. They are adjustable, so I can lift the front end of my truck up more if I wanted to. When you do that, basically you're compressing the spring more, pushing the coil or the rest of the shock body up in the coilover, which then pushes the wheel down harder, but because you're tightening the spring, it gives a rougher ride. So you kind of got to find that happy medium in there. These are a lot larger diameter at the base than the factory ones, and I'll get some close-ups here and show you. And they just simply bolt right in on the top, no additional spacers or anything like that. Next component is going to be your upper control arms. Did some videos installing these. Depending on the lift that you're doing and how tall you're going and tires and everything, you may or may not need to replace your control arms. So basically, when it comes to an alignment on your tires, you have the toe angle, which is your tires like this. You have camber, which is your tires like this, and then you have caster, which is like this, front to back. So when you lift a vehicle, you have several points of contact on your wheel between the shock, which is usually attached down at the lower control arm, attached to the knuckle. The upper control arm is attached to the top of the knuckle, and then you have some steering components. So as you lift your vehicle, that geometry can change depending on how it's being angled. So then you have to buy a different control arm that moves that geometry back in order to usually fix camber and sometimes caster. And then there's generally enough adjustment in your steering for toe. So that's the two main components on the front end. There are pros and cons like anything. Doing a lift like this is a lot better in the long run. It definitely allows you a lot of adjustment, more fine-tuning, a lot less maintenance, and a lot more reliability. Downside being is that it is much more expensive than like a spacer lift or anything like that. Kind of depends on if you want more look or more functionality. The control arms, you can go from basic all the way up to very expensive. We can get into that another time, but I just kind of wanted you to see with the wheel off what it all looks like. As far as control arms go, make sure that whatever you do, find ones that do have replaceable ball joints. That's a pretty often wear item. I would say, depending on how hard you're wheeling, anywhere between 25 to 50, 75,000 miles or so, just kind of depending on how hard you're wheeling. And then the bushings also, usually they're replaceable, or Heim joints. If you're doing something high end, they're pretty replaceable also. I like these having the greasable bushings in it. When I'm doing my own oil changes and stuff, I can just kind of grease them and go. The downfall to the urethane bushings like this is that they are extremely noisy. The slightest bit of dust or dirt in them, and they squeak and rattle all the time. So you're constantly trying to keep those lubricated and clean to where they don't make a bunch of noise. So, which I'm going to do as soon as I get done filming this. We'll move to the rear end here. All right, so for the rear end, you basically only have two things that make up the part of your suspension for the rear end. Those two things are your leaf springs and your shocks. Now there's a few different things you can do for leaf springs. Most people, if they're going to do an inexpensive lift, will just do blocks. Blocks is where you basically loosen your U-bolts here, you let the axle drop away, and then right underneath the leaf pack, where the leaf pack meets the axle, there's actually literally a block that you put in there and bolt in. So that's not a bad way to do it, but it's not the correct way to do it either. The correct way to do it is to change out the whole leaf pack. And in order to do that, you can either, if you know what kind of weight you're going to be running, then you can order a leaf pack. There's a bunch of different companies out there that do it. You can order a leaf pack that is specified to that weight. Now, if you aren't really sure how much weight you're going to be carrying, then what you can do is kind of what I did, and Icon makes an RXT leaf pack. So let me get the specs here. So the options for the leaf pack, in the configuration that it comes in from when you order it, it is a lift height of about 1.875 inches over stock height. Option 2 is you take the third leaf down and you swap it for the ones that come with it extra. And that gives you about a 2.25 inch lift over factory, or a 1.75 inch lift with an additional 200-pound load capacity. That's the configuration that I'm currently running. I figure that between the bed rack, the tent, and the extras, it's probably around 200 pounds, if not a little less. So I'm guessing it's giving me somewhere between 1.75 and about a 2-inch lift in the rear. Option number 3 is you actually add the third leaf in, and that gives you a lift height over stock of 2.625 inches or 1.125 inches with an additional 600-pound load capacity. So that's the reason I went with this leaf pack, is I wasn't really sure what I was going to be loading and how that was going to affect it. So these leaf packs run about $700, and it gives you plenty of options to kind of suit your needs. The other component is your shock. So your factory shocks definitely don't have the right amount of travel, and usually they don't have the right rebound in order to put up with or perform off-road. So these ones will be an extended travel. Usually aftermarket shocks will be an extended travel. You can buy like a mid-travel kit, but usually when you buy a shock, it's for a 1 to 3 inch lift or anything of that nature. These are the Icon 2.0 series with reservoirs. I do not like these. I've said it in multiple videos. They've leaked on me many times. When I first purchased these, they were about $250 each. They're now about $300 each. It's an extremely common and very well-known thing that Icons just leak and you get them rebuilt. One of the reasons that I purchased the Icons anyways was that it was the lowest priced option that could still be rebuilt. So I knew if or when they started leaking, it was going to cost me about $100 per side to have them rebuilt, and then I could have them rebuilt with any components that I enjoyed instead to change the valving and kind of tune the shocks. I ended up picking up a set of Fox 2.0 takeoffs. I believe these are like factory on the Pros and such. So these are rebuildable also. So the plan for me was I was going to have these rebuilt and then swap them out, have the Icons rebuilt with the valving I wanted, and then I would have these as spares, or I could sell them if I wanted to. That's kind of on hold for the moment. I am looking into a different company that, from what I've seen, I really like, and they're here local in Arizona. And as I've talked about previously, I like supporting local if I can. So definitely, if at all available, I'm going to go with them. Still kind of researching their product and hoping to reach out to their marketing team and maybe see if we can get some product to demo. So a couple things to remember: if you are going with like a big lift and you're changing out and adding a bunch of leaf packs and stuff, you have all of your brake lines and stuff right here that only have so much travel. So as you extend the travel of that shock and you're increasing the load capacity of that leaf pack, you have to increase the length on those brake lines, and potentially even like your ABS lines and stuff like that. So something to keep in mind. It's pretty easy to do that. It's probably one of the next things I'm going to do. I don't have that much travel, but I also don't want to have to worry about that in the future. Yeah, that's pretty much it for suspension. I mean, it's not real complicated. It's definitely fairly easy. I installed all of this suspension myself right here in the driveway with the same floor jack it's sitting on right now. So it's not real complicated. You just need to take your time and make sure that you purchase the components ahead of time. And watch a couple of YouTube videos. Make sure you look up your torque specs. And then after 500 miles of driving, retorque everything. So I think that's going to do it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.